next month I will celebrate 50 years of running. And apparently I'm a very slow learner because I'm a student of running. However, in the last several years I've discovered new things that I thought I already knew. And that's what this is about tonight, is we're going to talk about running skills. Almost everything that you read about running is how to train. Very little is about how to run. And some of what I'm going to say is going to challenge conventional wisdom, and some of it will support it. I will say this, that at 70 now, I am running better than I did at 60. At 70, I'm qualified twice now for the World Half Ironman Championships, which I would have had trouble completing a lap of swimming at 60. So there's a lot of room for improvement here. Think about your training, thinking about how much time do you spend thinking about how you run? Not how you train, how you actually run. Don't you find it curious that running is the one sport that they say running skills don't count? In fact, conventional wisdom says, don't worry about how you run. If you do all the training, your body will teach itself how to run efficiently. My answer to that is that why 2/3 of runners are injured every year? And my answer is yes. So what we're going to talk about tonight is how to program yourself to run more efficiently, and then some shortcuts to get there. So we're going to do several things. First thing we're going to do, we're going to talk about what's the difference between faster runners and slower runners? What's the difference between how you run at the beginning of a race and how you run at the end of the race? The second thing we're going to look at is some revolutionary, groundbreaking neuroscience about what talent really is. Where does it come from, and can you improve on it? And then finally, we're going to look for shortcuts. What's a faster way to do this? To do this, I'm going to tell some stories. And the first story I'm going to tell is, we're going to linger through this whole thing. And this comes from a phone call that I received in the late 1980s, right after I published an article which was about the St. George Marathon. And this phone rings, I pick it up, and this voice says, "Are you Tom Miller?" "Yeah." "Did you write this article?" "Yeah." "I want to see you tomorrow." And my answer was, "Okay, see me at 9 o'clock, cost you $35 to say hello." I won't tell you what I was thinking. The next day I met this guy. He was 65 years old. He drove in a Porsche. He had a long ponytail. He had a pink flamingo shirt. He had ratty shorts on. And the first thing he says is, "I just ran a 10K. I'm 65 years old. I've been running for a year. I just ran a 10K in under 40 minutes. How do I learn to handle that for a marathon?" That was the beginning of a long relationship. And what we're going to talk about tonight is, he took the long route to elite technique. And I'll explain that in a bit. What we're going to talk about is how can we short circuit what he did. So what we did was, first of all, I figured he ran a 38:50, 10K. He's got the speed to run someplace between 3:03 and 3:15. He says, that'll work. So the first thing we did was we videoed him. How do you run? One thing I knew that he also told me that he had been running 5Ks and 10Ks almost every weekend for the last year. But he had not been hurt. Which told me what? He's got some good things happening to him. So we videoed him. But we didn't look at his video right away. We looked at Olympic marathoners. And this pretty picture. This pretty picture is of Jim Ryan, the first high schooler to ever break 4 minutes in the mile. And what is curious is the technique demonstrated in this picture is identical to what the Africans and all the elite runners are running today. It hasn't changed. So we studied this picture, we studied the video, and then we looked at his. The first thing he said is, I don't run like that. I go, really? Why is that? He says, well, I'm landing out here. I'm up here. My arms are doing this. I go, yeah, you're right. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, let me go back to where I said the difference between fast runners and slow runners is that the research has shown that there was a very classic study done after the 84, or before the 84 Olympics, where researchers went to the Olympic trials for the women and videoed them at 9, 16, 22, and 24 miles to compare their stride dynamics. And what they found was that at 9 miles, everybody was running pretty much the same pace, and their stride dynamics were the same. However, those that finished, and they identified 40 individuals, they looked at the top 10 and the bottom 10 of those finishers to see what the differences were later. The similarities were, throughout the race, they all ran at about the same turnover rate. However, those who slowed down did some other things. What they did was just what John said, was as they slowed, they stood up more, they landed in front of themselves, called overstride. Overstride was a problem. The other thing was they weren't pushing off from behind anymore. They were standing up straighter. Does this sound familiar? Yes. Another study was reported by Owen Anderson in Running Research News, done by Hamilton and Associates, where they went to the national age-graded track and field championships and compared stride dynamics of younger groups to the older groups at each distance. And guess what they found out? Turnover rates were still pretty much the same. However, the older groups were now landing more in front of themselves, spending longer time, and what they identified was the key factor that started this kinetic chain of degradation. That's one of those college things, right? Was that as they were running, their knee no longer went hardly behind them at all. So they were running in front of themselves. Is that a big deal? It's a huge deal, because you have no power standing up straight. If you don't believe me, have somebody stand there and try to push them. But if you do this, all of a sudden, it changes everything. Make sense? So let me go back to John again. No, let me jump ahead to what does the neuroscience. This book, The Talent Code, has had a greater impact on me in the last 3 or 4 years, and it doesn't have one word in it about running. But it has impacted my running and a lot of other people's running. And what it says is that talent, the conventional wisdom is talent you're born with. Skills is what you do with that talent, so you become good at the clarinet or the piano or gymnastics or whatever it is. What this book says is Coyle, the author, investigated pockets where small populations are producing disproportionate number of high-level performers. Think of the Caribbean and baseball players, those kind of things. Or Italy during the Renaissance, or it doesn't matter where you go. And then he went to find out what's the science behind it. And what the neuroscientists were telling him is that talent is grown and you're not born with it. And what they're saying is that talent is defined as repeatable skills not dependent on body size. And I would add, or gender, or ethnicity. So, what they're saying is that all of our thinking patterns, our movement patterns, as we try to develop skills, are all governed by neurons firing. And when you practice something over and over and over again, what that does is that stimulates the growth of myelin, which is a living tissue which acts as an insulation. So over time, that set of circuitry that you keep practicing over and over becomes the default way, and that's the way you do it. It becomes your style. Now, think about the problem of this is, the vast majority of runners now did not come out of track programs, did they? No. Most of us were a little overweight, we had to get in shape, and so we started to jog, and pretty soon we just get to where we can jog longer and longer. That picture I did just show you, did that look like a jogger? No, but if that's the way most people start, they're not going to end up that way, are they? Because their circuitry is in place. That makes sense? So, in the talent code, what they say the secret is one, knowing exactly, imprinting in your mind what it is that you want to be able to express. The picture. That's what John did. Is he wanted to run like that. Run like that. This is a picture of an 80-year-old guy, by the way. How do you like those? That sort of messes things up for most of our excuses. All right? So you imprint what you want. Then you have to relentlessly practice doing it right. The old thing, practice makes perfect, is wrong. Practice makes permanent whatever you're practicing. So what do you need to be practicing needs to be perfect. Well, how do you do that on your own? The way John did it was easy. He had me criticizing him day after day after day. However, he's an incredible fast learner, a very bright guy, incredibly disciplined, who was very quickly able to pick up the advantages of what we were talking about. So you need to practice and error correct, error correct, error correct until what? One day, it all starts to work the way it's supposed to. There's actually a technical term for that. HSE, the holy shit effect. As in, holy shit, did I just do that? Wow, that was so cool. And that's what keeps you fired up, to put up with the intensity of concentration it takes to make this happen. Now, for 2 months, John and I ran together, constantly, giving him feedback. Once a week, at least, we videoed. Was he running like those guys? Yeah. He also did a little bit of creative training because he didn't have hundreds and hundreds of miles in behind him. He had been racing a lot. He had the speed. He had the strength. Did he have the endurance? We didn't know. So he did some creative stuff to get stronger. Like run the first half of the marathon course on Friday night and the second half on Saturday morning at race pace. One of the things I've always had trouble with conventional wisdom is you should do your long runs 2, maybe 3 minutes slower than what you plan to race. Think of what I just told you about growing talent. That comes under the heading of bull pucky. From a talent standpoint, what that helps you do is run at that pace. What do you need to do to go? Wow. Okay. So he practiced at race pace, but not the entire distance. And he did it in a way that the latter miles he was already tired. Now, we want to short circuit some things here, and I have to talk fast. How fast you run is dependent upon 2 things. Turnover rate, frequency of your stride, and what's the other one? Stride length. One of the fastest ways to make sure that your turnover rate is right is to do the following. You make yourself a Tom Miller running harness. Can't do both. All right? What this does is keeps your arms close, because if your arms swing out like this, your feet will swing out. You stay here, you keep your elbows back. If your elbows back, your chest is forward. Make sense? The other thing you do is that's set at 90, pretty much given. Even conventional wisdom agrees that's about the right turnover rate. The other thing with the faster turnover rate is you don't have time to do this kind of a thing. So You need to do this for a couple weeks. All right? The next thing you want to play with, the next thing while you're playing with this is you want to think about posture. What kind of posture do you want? Conventional wisdom says straight up and down. Where are you going? I don't know. If you watch all the Africans, they don't run that way. Watch the Americans. You know the ones back there? Why your posture is so important is with the proper posture, it can help sustain your forward momentum. Make sense? It was also conventional wisdom says you should lean forward from the ankle. I say no. You want to tip your pelvis a little and you can feel yourself going forward. The other thing that does is it puts your foot down underneath you because you're tilted, and it gives you a better platform for push-off. With me? So now we've got those two things going. What about where should your feet land? Here, 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 and here. I got news for you. Your body will tell you. If you go here, go, wow. You just keep backing up till you go, ooh, that feels good. That's where it ought to land, right underneath you. Should you land forefoot, heel, foot? Doesn't matter. Well, it does matter. What you want to land is with a very soft foot, because if you pick your foot up, it comes down, it'll go like that, so that you can get a little rebound. If you curl your toes up and try to jump, that's like trying to run with your heels in front of you. But if you go this way, what do you get? You get spring. The most important spring is this one. The most underappreciated running muscle is your butt. You literally have to get your butt in gear. And here's why. Brooks Johnson, the longtime coach for USA track and field at the Olympic level, says that the glutes are the primary initiator of forward propulsion. Because what happens, hard to do this all. Don't go too far away, bud. What happens is that when your foot comes down, you feel your foot spread because it's relaxed. If you feel your butt, you can feel tension. It loads. Then, because you're tilted and you're going forward, as you get here, it releases. Is that a big deal? Yeah, because then you can find the tipping point. If you want to go this way, there is no tipping point. To keep going, you have to push yourself. However, how about if you can enlist the tipping point? Tip a little, you go forward, and you can feel it happen. You go forward. Watch the Africans. They do it all the time. Chest up, elbows back, shoulders slightly in front of the hips, foot underneath, and bing, 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 bing. They scurry along. Now, I got enamored with this. I've always, even in Program to Run, I think I gave a little too much attention to saying that you apply power at push-off. What I've learned now is that, yeah, if you're running uphill, but if you're running on the flat, more important than towing off is this idea of hip extension. That's what starts it all. So now what you want to become is a spring-loaded momentum machine. Run with your back legs. Make sense? I have to do, I'm going to have to hold. For stride length, you want to get stronger, you get a stationary bike, and you do these. That will, in fact, make you stronger at the range of motion when running and at the same speed. But it has to be that hard. The big secret of getting your butt in gear is this one. Now you need to hold me a little here, all right? Because the scooter, all right, if you watch the motion from here, here, and here, the scooter motion of the support leg, not the other one, is the one that mimics perfectly getting your butt in gear. But you don't do it just like this. You have to put the weight vest on. So the other thing that Coyle says is that there has to be intensity of purpose and effort. And I have found in just 1 month of doing the scooter once a week, I do about 25 minutes continuously on a running course. Cool, you wouldn't do that with weights for 25 minutes. With the weight vest is I'm getting off the bike and running better than I ever have. Is that a big deal? Next week I go to the World Championships in the triathlon half Ironman. We'll see how it goes.